What if the real disease isn't in the body, but in the absence of purpose? Imagine this: after decades of waking up to an alarm clock, braving morning traffic, and navigating office politics, you're suddenly free. No obligations, no meetings, no deadlines. For some, this sounds like paradise, but for many, this is the beginning of a slow and quiet unraveling. The day of retirement arrives, often marked with applause, gifts, and the illusion of peace. But what comes next is a silence so deep it begins to echo in the soul. Without structure, without purpose, the mind turns inward, and not everyone is ready for what they find there. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, warned us about this. He believed the human psyche isn't designed to stagnate. It demands growth, evolution, and purpose, especially in the second half of life. Retirement, then, isn't a gentle fade into comfort. For many, it's a psychological cliff. And when society offers no new role, no new vision for who we are meant to become, illness, emotional and physical, creeps in. High blood pressure, anxiety, depression, and even early onset cognitive decline often follow retirement like shadows. These aren't just coincidences, they are signals. The body is crying out for something the soul is missing. In the absence of meaning, even the strongest minds begin to crumble. This isn't about working until you die. It's about redefining what life means once the career ends. When silence becomes suffocating, it's not noise we need, it's significance. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of its parents." But what about the burden that we ourselves carry when the life we lived loses its purpose? Retirement often triggers this collapse. All the external affirmations, the promotions, the paychecks, the titles, disappear, and what's left? For many, nothing but a hollow echo of their former identity. Jung warned us that the ego, if left unchallenged, eventually becomes a prison, and when the career ends, so does the ego's strongest anchor. In the modern world, identity is often synonymous with productivity. The question, "What do you do?" is asked not out of curiosity, but as a measure of worth. Remove the do, and the question becomes terrifying. Who are you? Jung believed that the second half of life is meant for inner work, for confronting the shadow, understanding the self, and achieving individuation. But society rarely prepares us for this stage. Instead, it celebrates retirement as an ending rather than a transition. The result, psychological collapse, a deep, aching loss of meaning. And in the absence of meaning, humans suffer. The body weakens, the immune system falters, the heart grows heavy. Purpose isn't optional, it's biological. Without it, we're not just lost, we begin to decay. In many traditional cultures, transitions were marked with rituals, initiations that symbolized death and rebirth. Retirement in the modern age should be one of those moments, but instead it's treated like a finish line, a moment to rest, to fade away. Yet for the psyche, it's a rupture. Work isn't just economic, it's existential. Through work, people find connection, relevance, structure, and identity. Remove it abruptly, and you don't just stop being a worker, you begin to question if you are anyone at all. This is what Jung called a symbolic death. Without a ritual, without a cultural container to guide the transformation, the retired individual is left in limbo, no longer who they were, not yet who they are meant to become. This in-between is dangerous. It's where depression festers, where regrets resurface, and where the shadow, the repressed parts of the self, emerges uninvited. But it doesn't have to end this way. Jung believed that every ending was also a beginning. The death of the working self can give birth to the inner self, if we're willing to descend into the unknown. Retirement, then, is not a full stop. It's a threshold. And Those who fail to cross it consciously risk becoming ghosts of themselves, haunted by the life they didn't finish living. You retire, thinking the battles are over. But then your health declines, aches with no medical explanation, insomnia, anxiety, even panic attacks. You visit doctors, run tests, and nothing concrete shows up. That's because the battlefield has shifted. The war is no longer outside, it's within. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious is not silent. It speaks in dreams, in symbols, and when ignored, it begins to scream through the body. Psychosomatic illness, he believed, is the soul's language when all other forms of communication fail. What you suppress mentally, you express physically. Retirement removes distractions. There are no more tasks to hide behind, no more goals to chase, and into that void rush, the unresolved. Regrets, traumas, doubts, unlived passions, they all surface. It's not a coincidence that so many retirees suffer illness soon after leaving their jobs. It's not just aging, it's the psyche manifesting its pain. When the soul lacks expression, the body takes the hit. This is the time when inner work becomes essential, not optional. Meditation, therapy, journaling, creative expression. These aren't luxuries, they are lifelines. Because if you don't learn to listen to the whispers of the unconscious, you'll be forced to confront its roars. Who are you without the uniform, the title, the business card? Retirement strips away the roles we've played, and what's left beneath is often a stranger. Jung called these roles personas, masks we wear to navigate society. They're useful, necessary, but they are not us. And when retirement removes the mask, the raw, unfiltered self is exposed. This confrontation can be liberating or terrifying. Some discover they were never meant to do the work they did. Others realize their dreams were abandoned decades ago. Still others find they don't know how to exist without being needed, without being useful. This is the spiritual challenge of retirement, the demand to face the self, not the professional, not the parent, not the spouse, the you that has always been there, waiting. Jung saw this as sacred. Individuation, the journey toward wholeness, often begins here, but it requires courage, and without guidance, many turn back, clinging to old identities. That's when the descent begins. Depression, addiction, isolation. Not because retirement is bad, but because it forces a reckoning. The self isn't always gentle, but it is honest, and it's the only path to true healing in the second half of life. Silence is not empty, it's full of everything you've avoided. The shadow, in Jungian psychology, is the part of ourselves we reject. Our rage, our envy, our fear, our shame, it stays hidden as long as we're busy. But retirement brings stillness, and in stillness, the shadow awakens. Many retirees become irritable, bitter, or anxious, not because life is worse, but because the noise that once drowned the shadow is gone. Now it speaks loudly. This is why so many people deteriorate emotionally after leaving the workforce. They're not lazy, they're haunted by the parts of themselves they never confronted. Jung believed that integrating the shadow was the key to psychological health, not destroying it, integrating it, making peace with it, understanding its messages. Because often our shadow contains power, buried passions, lost dreams, creative fire. Retirement offers the time and space for this work, but without the tools or awareness, people drown in what could have saved them. The shadow isn't the enemy, avoidance is. If we dare to face it, the monster under the bed often turns out to be a guide. Western society sells a lie that the narrative arc of life ends at retirement. You've worked, contributed, paid your dues, now fade into leisure. But Carl Jung would have called that psychological suicide. For Jung, the human being is never complete until the end. Life after 60 isn't a slow decline. It's the most crucial phase of inner development. This is when the ego must loosen its grip and the deeper self begins to speak louder. It's not the end, it's the second act. The problem is, most people aren't prepared for this stage. They've mastered careers, raised families, built identities based on doing. But being, that's uncharted territory. And so, the unfinished journey becomes a crisis. The soul, having been ignored for decades, demands attention. Passions resurface, longings return. Questions once buried emerge. What was I really meant to do? Who am I without achievements? Is there still time? Jung believed the second half of life should be about synthesis, not survival. It's a time for wisdom to emerge, not retreat. But when the culture offers no blueprint, no mythology for this phase, individuals flounder. They sit in comfort, but drown in confusion. Retirement is not a conclusion. It's a crossroad, and only those who walk the inner road will discover its hidden treasure. Modern society equates worth with productivity. You are only as valuable as what you produce. This myth is drilled into us from childhood, and it doesn't vanish with age. Instead, it poisons retirement. People retire, but they can't stop working, not because they want to, but because they fear becoming irrelevant. This isn't ambition, it's addiction to validation, to doing, to being seen. Jung would say this is the tyranny of the ego. The part of us that fears death, fears stillness, fears the loss of identity, and our culture feeds it with slogans like, "Never stop hustling," or "You're only as good as your output." But this is a lie, a trap, and one that turns what should be a sacred transition into a psychological war zone. The body, no longer young, resists. The mind, no longer stimulated, collapses. And the heart, tired of performing, breaks. What if we reframed retirement, not as retreat, but as return? Return to self, to curiosity, to legacy. Productivity isn't the enemy, but worshipping it, that's a sickness, one that eats away at peace, one restless night at a time. Jung's wisdom offers an antidote: depth over speed, meaning over momentum, being over doing. There's a calling that echoes faintly through the second half of life. It's not loud like ambition. It's not urgent like youth. It's quiet, ancient, soulful, and most people never answer it. Jung believed that every life has two arcs. The first is outer, career, family, identity building. The second is inner, reflection, healing, transformation, legacy. But the bridge between them, it's fragile. And without guidance, many fall into the void instead of crossing. That's why so many feel lost after 60. The outer tasks are done, the ladder climbed, the role played, but the inner work, the real journey, hasn't begun. This is where individuation comes in, the process of becoming whole, of integrating the fragmented parts, of reconciling the shadow, of discovering a self that was buried beneath decades of performance. It's not easy. It requires solitude, courage, surrender, but it's the only path to true fulfillment. The second half of life isn't about fading away. It's about blazing inward. It's where the sage is born, where wisdom replaces ambition, and where the soul, long silenced, finally speaks. Retirement is not the last chapter. It's the prologue to your most meaningful story yet. In myths across cultures, the elder isn't a relic of the past. They are the gatekeepers of wisdom, the oracle, the shaman, the sage. But in modern society, age has been stripped of its value. Wrinkles are erased, experience is ignored, and the archetype of the elder has been replaced by the cult of youth. Jung warned us that when archetypes are repressed, societies become ill, and the neglect of the sage is one of our greatest cultural failures. The retired individual is often treated like a finished product, set aside, decorated perhaps, but no longer vital. Yet, It is precisely in this stage that the deepest truths emerge. Years of lived experience crystallize into insight, into vision, into guidance the younger generations desperately need, but rarely seek. Jung saw the sage not as a title, but as a psychic potential. One must earn it, not by age alone, but through reflection, through suffering, through synthesis. Our world needs elders, not just old people, but awakened elders, those who've crossed the threshold of ego and returned with a map. Retirement should not be exile. It should be the emergence of the sage. But this requires a shift, not just in culture, but in the soul of each retiree, the willingness to step into a new identity, not the doer, the knower. There's a quiet tragedy unfolding all around us, retirees drifting into nothingness, not from lack of health, but from lack of integration. Jung called this the failure of individuation. Individuation is not self-help, it is soul work. It is the process of unifying all the fragmented parts of the self, the child, the shadow, the persona, the inner sage. Without it, a person may age, but they do not evolve. They stagnate, and stagnation breeds illness, not just physically, but spiritually. Depression, resentment, cynicism, these are not just emotions. They are symptoms, signs that the soul has been left behind. Jung's patients who suffered most were not those with trauma, but those who had never asked who they truly were. And retirement, for the non-individuated, becomes a void. No longer driven by outer tasks, they are swallowed by inner emptiness. Society celebrates youth because it fears the void. But Jung would say, enter it, confront it. Within that darkness lies the self, and to meet it is to become whole. The greatest risk of retirement is not irrelevance, it's unrealized selfhood, to die without ever having met the person you truly are. That is the tragedy Jung warned us about. Ancient cultures understood the necessity of initiation. Boys became men, girls became women, warriors became elders, each phase marked by ritual, by fire, by transformation. But today, retirement is treated like a party, a handshake, a pension plan. Jung would argue that this is why so many collapse after leaving work. They were never initiated. They transitioned without transformation. And so they enter a phase of life without the psychic tools to navigate it. Initiation is not about ceremony alone. It's about confronting death, symbolic death. The death of the role, the status, the identity. Only through this can the new self be born. Without it, retirees wander, disoriented, clinging to old roles, chasing relevance, or sinking into silence. What if retirement included ritual, a conscious letting go, a descent into the self, a re-emergence with purpose redefined, not in titles or tasks, but in wisdom? Jung believed we all needed to face the unconscious consciously. Retirement is the perfect threshold for that confrontation. It is not the end. It is the descent before the ascent, the cocoon before emergence. But it requires intention. It requires guidance, and most of all, it requires a society that sees elders not as leftovers, but as leaders of a new kind. The ego is a brilliant architect. It builds careers, protects reputations, fuels ambition, but it is also fragile, terrified of irrelevance, obsessed with control, and when retirement strikes, it shatters. Carl Jung believed that the ego was only one part of the psyche, and not the most important. In youth, it serves us. It helps us establish our place in the world, but in the second half of life, it becomes a barrier, a wall between who we appear to be and who we truly are. Many resist this transformation. They double down on old roles. They volunteer obsessively, overschedule their days, or fixate on control, over routines, over their spouses, even over their health. It's not productivity, it's panic. because the soul, long buried, begins to stir. The path from ego to soul is not paved. It's dark, lonely. It asks for surrender. It confronts you with every shadow you've denied, every dream you've abandoned, every mask you've worn. And yet, it is the only path that leads to peace. Jung called this process individuation. It is not about becoming better, it's about becoming whole. Retirees who embrace this descent often emerge radiant, wise, alive in ways they never were before. But those who cling to the ego rot from within. Their smiles fade, their joy dims, and the silence becomes unbearable. This isn't just psychology, it's spiritual physics. What refuses to evolve begins to decay. There is no roadmap for modern elders, no scripts, no clear purpose, and in the absence of a role, many drift. Television, gardening, short walks, doctor's visits, that's the daily rhythm of millions. But under that quiet routine is often a devastating emptiness. Carl Jung believed that human beings need a myth, a narrative that places them in the cosmos with meaning, but today's myth ends too early. It glorifies youth, celebrates middle age, and then silence. We need a new story, a new role for those who have crossed the mountains of life, not as relics, but as torchbearers. In tribal cultures, the elder was the memory of the people, the one who told stories around fires, who blessed warriors, who saw with eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of many suns. Their wisdom wasn't optional, it was sacred. In the modern world, that fire has gone out, but it can be rekindled. The elder's new role is not to retreat, it is to return, to communities, to families, to public life, with insight forged by experience. Not to lecture, but to guide. Not to command, but to mentor. Not to cling to the past, but to light the future. This redefinition won't come from governments or institutions. It must come from within, one retiree at a time, choosing to be more than forgotten. You are not retired. You are rewired. It often happens unexpectedly. A former engineer discovers painting. A grandmother becomes a public speaker. A retired janitor starts writing poetry. These stories might seem rare, but they point to something Jung deeply believed, that the psyche never stops growing and that purpose can awaken at any age. The late awakening is not a myth. It's a biological, psychological, and spiritual truth. Purpose isn't a privilege of youth, it's the fuel of existence. What's tragic is how many never discover this. They accept society's verdict, that they are done, that their time has passed, and so they shrink emotionally and spiritually. Their world becomes smaller, their body aches more, their eyes lose light. But those who awaken, they glow, they get up with fire in their chest. They speak differently. Their voice carries something deeper, something essential. Purpose doesn't need to be grand. It can be a garden that teaches you patience, a letter you write that mends a broken relationship, a story you finally share after years of silence. Jung would call this the full circle. The self, once fragmented, becomes one, not because life was perfect, but because it was felt deeply. The cure for post-retirement decay is not medicine, it is meaning. And the truth is this: it's never too late to begin again. In fact, it might be the only time you're finally free enough to live fully. As we reach the culmination of this exploration into the profound psychological and spiritual dimensions of retirement, it's essential to reflect on the journey we've undertaken. We've delved into the depths of the human psyche, examining the challenges and transformations that accompany the transition into this new phase of life. The insights of Carl Jung have illuminated the path, revealing the necessity of confronting our inner selves, embracing the shadow, and seeking individuation. Retirement, often perceived merely as the cessation of professional activity, is, in truth, a significant rite of passage. It's a period that beckons us to reevaluate our identities, to rediscover purpose beyond occupational roles, and to engage in the profound work of self-realization. Jung emphasized that the second half of life is not a decline, but an opportunity for growth, for the soul to emerge and guide us toward wholeness. In this context, the concept of purpose transcends societal expectations. It's not confined to productivity or external achievements, but is rooted in the alignment with our inner truths and values. The journey inward, though challenging, offers the promise of authenticity and fulfillment. It's a call to listen to the whispers of our soul, to acknowledge the dreams deferred, and to embrace the totality of our being. This introspective voyage is not undertaken in isolation. It's a shared human experience, one that connects us through the universal themes of change, loss, and the quest for meaning. As we navigate this terrain, we find solace and strength in the knowledge that others have walked similar paths, facing their own shadows and emerging transformed. In the tapestry of human experience, the spiritual dimension holds a place of profound significance. It's here that we encounter the enduring truths that have guided humanity through the ages. Among these is the message encapsulated in the words, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." This declaration speaks to the boundless love and grace extended to all, offering hope and redemption. Embracing this message invites us into a relationship that transcends the temporal and touches the eternal. It's an invitation to find peace amidst life's uncertainties, to discover purpose beyond societal roles, and to experience a love that is unconditional and transformative. This spiritual awakening complements the psychological journey, providing a foundation upon which to build a life of depth and significance. As we conclude, I encourage you to reflect on your own journey. Consider the paths you've taken, the lessons learned, and the growth achieved. Recognize the value of this phase of life, not as an end, but as a beginning, a chance to live with intention, to nurture your inner self, and to connect with the divine. If this exploration has resonated with you, I invite you to engage further. Like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join a community committed to personal growth and spiritual discovery. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. Your story may inspire others on their journey. Remember, the transition into retirement is not a descent into obscurity, but an ascent into a new realm of possibility. Embrace it with courage, curiosity, and an open heart. Allow the insights gained to guide you toward a life rich in meaning, connection, and joy. Thank you for accompanying us on this journey. May you find peace, purpose, and profound fulfillment in the chapters yet to be written.